Alright, so this is the Element RC Pyro 230, fully built up, guys. I probably put about 100 batteries through this frame. Had some pretty intense crashes from a couple hundred feet up, and it's held up really well. You can see there's not any chips on the arms like you typically get on a frame with lower quality carbon. Bottom skid plates totally fine, a couple scratches, but no chips, no serious damage. The only one here is this back frame or back arm, but that was from a crash on cement, so that's understandable, but it's not framed too bad. You can see the motor is pretty beat up. But just a couple of things about this frame that I really like. First of all, you have the camera mount here that has supports in the back of the camera to keep it from moving. So you can see here the camera does not move at all, and you can really get a good camera angle, about 45-50 degrees almost. Another thing is the top plate that comes with it that allows you to mount a GoPro mount on top of the frame. This is a really nice feature. A lot of, like the race blade that I have also, you have to thread a Velcro strap on top of the camera, and it kind of gets in the way of the camera and reduces the amount of camera tilt you can actually get. Another thing I really like is the height here. It's got the 25mm standoffs for a nice low profile build. Another feature I like is the antenna mount here. It's really solid, and also the XT60 slides right in there. I just put a new XT60 on, so I haven't had time to slide it in, but it just pops right in there. So yeah, it basically fixes all the problems that I had with the race blade. And it's a really solid frame. The carbon's really high quality, and so far I'm really happy with it. Alright, so here's the race blade, just for a little bit of a comparison. Like I was saying, the Velcro strap goes right on top of the camera, so it does block the camera a little bit. And if you're using a 2.1mm lens, you're going to see the strap in the frame. So first things first, like I mentioned, the camera strap, or the camera mount on the Pyro is really solid. This guy is not solid. So if you slam down, the camera's going to tilt down. It's really hard to get these screws that come with the camera to stay tight. So the Pyro solves that issue very well. Another thing I mentioned was the antenna SMA mount and the XT60 mount on the race blade. This, I don't know if you guys can see, but it's already starting to crack, and it's just a matter of time before this part snaps off, because it's like 2mm carbon. And I've had a lot of issues where the XT60 will come off in a crash, and chop a battery lead, chop a balance lead. Another thing is this frame is not rigid at all. As you can see, I have missing screws from crashes, or just from flying, honestly. It's just a lot of extra hardware, and I get what they were trying to do to make it where it's, you can just remove an arm, throw a new arm on if you break the arm, and you can already have motors and ESC'S mounted to the arm. But with the Pyro, you're not going to break an arm. I've had some really bad crashes, and it's not even chipped at all. So I think it's kind of more of like a cool feature to like get people excited, but it's not really practical. And it's just a lot of extra weight, and this frame is very shaky when the screws start getting loose, so you gotta constantly monitor that. Yeah, so you can see I'm kind of slowly dismantling this frame and moving away from it. So I'm probably going to be building another Pyro, so I have two identical frames to race with. So for this build, I went with the XSR. It's the new S-Bus enabled
Free Sky receiver that we're going to run with the NAZE 32 Rev 6. So first thing we're going to do here is to depin the receiver like I do on all my builds. This is going to allow us to stack the receiver on top of the flight controller nice and flush. So once you clip off that little white plastic plug that comes on the receiver, just go ahead and take your soldering iron, heat up the tip, get some solder on there, and just heat up the pins and they should slide right out with some pliers. So once you've done that, just go ahead and throw a little bit of fresh solder on the pads. Just be careful that you don't bridge the pads, they're pretty small, so make sure you have a nice sharp soldering iron tip. And then once we have that done, we're going to go ahead and take the power, the ground, and the signal wire and solder those onto the pads. So the top one that you see is going to be the ground, the topmost pad. And the second pad we're going to solder on is the power. That's going to go right below the ground. Okay, the next one we're going to do is the S-bus signal wire, which is going to go on the bottom pad. So there's 5 pads. It's going to go ground, power, smart port, CPPM, and S-bus. So S-bus is the white wire here. We're going to throw that on the bottom pad, guys. And then once you have that on, we're going to take some leftover green wire that I have. It doesn't matter the color. I just like to use green for the telemetry. And we're going to solder that on to the pad below the power, which is going to be the 3rd pad. So the 4th pad is going to be left open because that's for CPPM, which we are not using. Alright, so now we're going to connect the NAZE, the XSR to the NAZE. So here's a diagram showing you guys what we're going to be doing here. So we're going to be using the ground, the 5-volt, UR2TX, and soft serial 1TX, soft serial 1RX on the left side, guys. That's pins 4 and 5 are the ones we're going to be bridging. So yeah, you're going to have to bridge those 2 pins, 4 and 5, in order to get telemetry to work on the NAZE. In the video here, I actually did pins 7 and 8, which is an option, but I'd recommend that you do 5 and 6. So what you're going to want to do is either just take a glob of solder and just try to get a bridge on those 2 pin headers, or you can take a wire and just thread them through both to make the connection. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the green wire coming off the XSR, and we're just going to solder that on to any point on those 2 pin headers that's bridged. So you can just connect it to the hole number 5 or number 6, or just right in the middle of the solder that you bridged on. And then from there, we're going to take the ground wire, the power wire, and the signal wire, and we're going to solder those on to the other pin headers on the left side here. So the ground's going to go on the top, the power is going to go right below the ground on the next hole, and then the S-bus signal is going to go to pin header 3. Just go ahead and pre-tin those tips and then just slide them through, and then heat the other side of the flight controllers and just slide those wires right through there. Just make sure you have a nice clean connection. The solder is covering all of the hole. Alright, so I've been doing this new method with my builds lately where I, desolder all the wires from the ESCs, and then I just take the ground and the signal and solder those onto the flight controller into the motor ports. And then later on we can connect those wires to the ESCs. It just makes it a lot easier to mount everything, to mount the flight controller, and then all you have to do is just connect the wires to the appropriate ESCs. So just make sure you measure out enough wires so that you can reach the ESCs, and we're gonna solder these into the motor outputs 1 through 4. So ground's gonna go on the top. You don't need to worry about power, and signal's gonna go on the bottom row. Alright, so to power the NAZE 32, you're going to want to run it off of 5 volts. This board cannot run on 4S, so what we're going to want to do is take a power and a ground wire, run it from the 5 volt out on the PDB, and run that into any of the open motor ports on the flight controller. So you can do 5, 6, 7, 8, it doesn't matter. Just run the power and the ground through those holes, and then we're going to run those wires onto the 5 volt out on the PDB. So to mount the flight controller, I'm using some 10mm nylon standoffs to create some space between the power distribution board and the flight controller. And what we're going to do is we're going to mount the flight controller upside down with the USB port facing out the side so it has easy access, and this is going to help keep the wires for the ESCs tucked in there nice and clean, and it will allow us to stack the XSR on top of the flight controller nice and flush. So we're just going to take some double-sided tape and we're going to put that on the XSR so that there's no metal touching between the flight controller and the XSR, and then we're just going to stack that right on top, and we're going to take some nylon screws and screw the flight controller onto the 10mm nylon standoffs. Alright, as I mentioned before, I like to keep my ESCs naked for most of the build, and then when we get to the point where we're going to wire them up, it's really easy. You have the wires already coming off of the flight controller, and so we're just going to pre-tin the ESC pads, and we're going to solder on the signal and the ground onto the Zeus 20 amp ESCs, which I'm using here. So the ground wire is going to go on the top pad, and the signal wire is going to go on the pad below that on the ESCs. Then we're just going to take some double-sided tape and stick those down onto the arm, and we're going to repeat this process for all 4 ESCs. And at this point, you just want to measure out to make sure that your motor wires reach the motor pads on the ESCs. So for wire ordering, motor 1 is going to go to the back right, motor 2 is going to go to the front right, motor 3 back left, and then motor 4 is going to be the front left. So just measure out the wires and trim off any excess that you might have just to save a little bit of weight, and just solder on all 4 ESCs, and then we'll move on to the motors. Alright, so once we have the signal on the ground going to the ESCs, we're going to go ahead and measure out the power and the ground for the to power the ESCs. So, take some 18 gauge, 20 gauge wire would be fine, and we're going to pre-tin the pads on the ESCs and go ahead and wire up the power, which is going to be the pad right above the signal wire coming off of the ESC, and the ground, which is going to be the opposite pad. And just measure them out and make sure you have just enough slack to reach the PDB, and go ahead and solder those on, and then we're going to connect them to the PDB. just also make sure that you have not too much slack so that the wiring is not all bunched up in there, because the flight controller is going to be stacked on there pretty tight. So just make sure you have enough room to stack the flight controller. Alright, moving on to the LED wiring and mounting. So we're going to be using these Cobb LEDs I got from multirotormania.com. These do run on 12 volts, so you're going to need a PDB that has a 12 volt output, or you're going to need to use a Pololu 12 volt step down. The PDB that I'm using is really handy because it has a 5 volt out and a 12 volt out to power LEDs and the flight controller. You can pretty much get it from any hobby store. I got it from multirotormania.com. It's about 10 bucks. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and solder on some power and ground wires to the LEDs. Just make sure you have enough slack so that we can measure out enough to reach the PDB on the middle of the frame. Go ahead and thread the power and ground wire through the hole on the bottom of the body, and just measure out enough slack to reach the 12 volt output on the PDB. And we're going to repeat this for the other LED, and then what we're going to do is we're going to bridge the power and the ground for both LEDs together and just solder those onto the positive and negative on the 12 volt output on the PDB. Alright, so now we're going to power the NAZE and the board. So what we're going to do, as I mentioned before, is we should have the power and ground wire going into any of the open motor ports on the NAZE, and then we're going to connect those wires to the 5-volt output on the PDB. Alright, for the XT60, I'm actually using some thinner gauge wire than I normally use, just because I tried using thicker gauge wire and I was unable to mount the XT60 through the hole on the top plate while having enough room for the Hawkeye VTX. So I used some 16 gauge wire, which it's fine, it can handle 4S, no problem. And because it's inside the frame, it's nice and protected, so it's not going to get chopped by your props in a crash. So we're just going to solder on the ground and the power to any empty space on the outer side of the PDB, and then that's going to allow us to power the frame. Alright, now moving on to the FPV setup. For this build and for all my builds, I use the Hawkeye 200mW VTX. It's a really great VTX, nice and light. It does 40 channel race band, and I like to keep all of my VTXs the same just in case I'm in the field and one of my VTXs goes out, I can swap it from another frame that I'm not using. So I'm going to go ahead and D-pin the power and ground for the VTX, and then I'm just going to direct solder a power and ground wire onto those pads, and then just direct those onto the PDB. So I actually removed the heat shrink that comes on the VTX, and I'm just going to throw on some nice thicker heat shrink. So what you're going to want to do if you do this step is just cut out a hole for the channel dip switches so that you can access those once the heat shrink shrinks down. So now we just need to measure out the power and ground going into the VTX. So I'm going to be running this off of the 12 volt pad on the PDB. Sorry, the 5 volt pad. Just so it has a nice constant power coming into it. This kind of acts as a filter for the VTX. So, measure out the length, cut down the wires, and then you're going to pre-tin the tips, and then just solder that onto the PDB, the 5 volt out on the PDB. So we're going to take the other wire that comes with the VTX. We're going to remove the audio wires, which are going to be the white and the green, and we're going to connect those to the camera wire. So this is actually a plug from another VTX that I had, so I'm just swapping out the wires. But the wire that comes with your Hawkeye VTX is fine. You don't need to change the power, ground, and signal. Just leave those the same. Just remove the other 2 wires that I mentioned. So we're going to measure out the wire length so that we can run these wires below the PDB and connect them to the camera. So once you have the wires measured out to length, just go ahead and pre-tin the both ends, which would be the end coming from the camera and the end going into the VTX. And then we're just going to throw some heat shrink onto the wires, and we're going to solder the 2 wires together for each video, power and ground, and then just throw the heat shrink over the connection and shrink those up. Alright, so at this point we're going to take some clear heat shrink. I got this stuff from Amazon. It's really high quality, really thick, and it lasts a long time, and it keeps clean and protects the ESCs. So just cut off 4 pieces, about 1.5 inches long, and then you're just going to slide those onto the arm before we solder on the motors. Alright, so now we're going to solder on the motors to the ESC pads. Now that you can change motor direction in BLHELI just using the CLEANFLIGHT pass-through, just connecting to the flight controller, I would recommend just soldering the motor wires straight on. Don't cross any of the wires, because we can just change the direction in BLHELI in like 30 seconds. This way, if a couple motors fry or you break a motor, you can know that all you have to do is solder on the motor wires straight, and the ESC will be spinning the motor in the right direction. So like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I really like this camera mount. As you can see, it has the two bars going across the back of the camera, and these are adjustable. All you need to do is loosen them up with a hex screwdriver. So go ahead and throw your camera in there, and then use the screws that come with the camera and tighten those down. And then you can just use some pliers or a socket wrench to hold down the lock nut, and then just use a hex screw on the other side to tighten down the two bars at whatever angle you like. So we're going to connect the FPV camera. I had to use pliers because it's a little bit difficult to get in there. So once we have that connected, there's actually two holes in the bottom of the frame where you can slide in the sidewalls that keep the camera tight. And then once we have that in there, I'm just going to make sure that the camera's nice and secure, and once I have the angle that I like, and then we can throw the top plate on. So like I mentioned before, this frame has a really nice way of mounting the XT60 to protect it from getting chopped up in the props during a crash. So you just slide it through the hole, and then you basically rotate the circular kind of mount that keeps the XT60 locked in place. Then you're just going to slide through your pigtail into the back hole here, lock that down with the nut that comes with it, and I actually had to mount my Hawkeye a little bit to the side so that the power and ground coming off the XT60 had room in there. And then we're just going to line up the camera mount sidewalls and pop those into the holes in the top plate, and then tighten the screws down. Next is going to be to figure out how we're going to mount the GoPro. So what I did for the initial part of the build is I just threaded a Velcro strap through the GoPro mount that comes with the frame, and I'm going to use some foam to create a little bit of a wedge, and then I'm going to mount my EXO Pro case on top of that foam at about a 35-degree angle. the last thing we're going to do is we're going to apply some hot glue to the LEDs. This is going to kind of help diffuse the light a little bit so that it's not as intense, and it's also going to protect the LEDs in crashes and also create kind of like a skid pad for the bottom of the frame. So once the hot glue dries down, you're just going to throw some heat shrink over those. Obviously make sure it's clear heat shrink, and then we're just going to shrink that down, and what's going to happen is the hot glue is going to disperse inside of the heat shrink and make a really nice and clear seal there. As far as prop choice goes for this frame and these motors, I've been liking the quad blades a lot that I got from propsman.com, getpropsman.com. If you guys want to get props from there, you can use my discount code SFPV, and that'll get you 20% off the quad blades. They're going to be carrying the Dal prop tri-blades here in the next week, and you can use that same code. Actually, sorry, I'm going to be getting a new code, so I'll post that in the description for the Dal prop tri-blades. I'll get you guys 5% off for that. The thing I like about the quad blades is they offer a little bit tighter cornering. They seem to have better handling for tighter courses. Not as much thrust on the top end. So if I'm running on an outdoor track, a longer track, I'm going to be using the tri blades most likely. These props are kind of brittle. They're going to break a lot. So if you're flying in an area, or you're flying really aggressive, where you're going to be breaking a lot of props, I would recommend using the Dal props because they're a lot more durable. Alright, so the really cool thing about the new BetaFlight is that you can actually use just the micro USB connection to your flight controller to adjust the ESC settings. So go ahead and plug in your flight controller, and then you're going to select the CLEANFLIGHT up in the select tab. It's number 5, and then just make sure you select the right COM port on the bottom left, and then you're going to click connect, read setup, and for this you're going to want to have your battery plugged in. Okay, so that's going to tell you what version of BLHELI you're running. And the next thing you're going to want to do is, after you make sure that all your ESCs are running the same version of BLHELI, if they're not, all you need to do is click on the flash BLHELI. Is we're going to reverse the motor direction for motors 1 and 4. That's going to be your back right motor and your front left motor. So just go up to the motor direction, and so as you can see here for motor 3, I made it normal. What I do is I set the beacon delay to 2 to 5 minutes. I'd recommend doing 2 minutes, and bump up the beacon strength. And what this is going to do is when you lose your quad, after 2 minutes of inactivity, your ESCs are going to start beeping. So this is kind of an alternative to a buzzer. It saves some weight, and it's a pretty surefire way of finding your quad as long as the battery hasn't ejected. Alright, so we're going to flash beta flight. You want to flash the latest version. I've been running 2.4 lately. I've tried 2.5, but I've been having some issues, so I've kind of gone back to 2.4 as that seems to be the most stable version. So once you download the correct version, which is going to be the NAZE, you're going to load firmware local. Just go to your downloads, and you should see the beta flight 2.4 NAZE hex file. So just load that, and then we're going to click flash firmware. Alright, so first thing we're going to want to do is go into the configuration tab and set the board alignment. So you guys can just play around with this. Usually what you want to do is adjust the roll and the yaw. Save that and go back into the setup and move the quad around and make sure that it's moving in the same direction as you're moving it in the picture there. So for this layout that I have on the NAZE, I did the roll adjustment to 180 and the yaw to 180. Alright, so we're going to set the min throttle to 1050, and to find out what your min throttle is, you can go to the motors tab and slowly move the bar up to see when your motor starts spinning at what throttle value, and then set that as minimum throttle. We're going to set the RX to serial, and we're going to select S-Bus, and we're going to turn on telemetry and soft serial. Save that, and we're going to go into the ports tab. So for UART2, you want to set that to serial RX, and then soft serial 2, you want to make that smart port auto. Just ignore what I'm doing here. This was an older video of another setup. But yeah, so UART2 should be serial RX, and soft serial 2 should be the smart port, which is going to allow us to do telemetry. So for the flight mode, for the modes, we're going to set the arm to auxiliary 1. For air mode, I have it on another switch, which is aux 2, and for Acro Plus, I have it on another switch, which is aux 3, if you want to use that. To figure out what your auxiliary channels are, you can just go into the receiver tab and flip the switches and see which switches move which auxiliary channel. If none of the auxiliary channels are moving when you flip a switch, you just need to go into your Tyrannus and create a new channel to allow it to pick up on the receiver tab. The last thing you want to do is set the telemetry inversion to on, and this is going to allow us to send battery voltage to the Tyrannus. So for the PIDs on this quad, I'm using the multi-way rewrite stock settings, and I'm currently running 0.9, 0.9, 0.9 for roll, pitch, and yaw, but you can set it to whatever you feel comfortable with. The lower this number is, the less responsive the quad's going to feel. The higher it is, the more difficult it's going to be to control, but you're going to have more responsiveness.